All right. Well, I think you saw how we run the gig from the last round. So I'll give each one of the panelists a couple minutes to introduce themselves. But very esteemed group, good swath and experiences that we're looking at here, and actually a hometown, UTSA. I noticed have Jack, you're from San Antonio at some point?
Yes, 4 years there.
Very good. So what's interesting about UTSA, it was one of the first Air Force-supported cybersecurity accredited NSA programs that was put out there. So this is another example of how, in this case, it was Air Intelligence Agency, what's now 24th and 25th Air Force, which is really where all of our intel and cyber operations come from, and how they partnered with the University of Texas at San Antonio to build these cyber programs at the bachelor and master's level, and where the grants and the support, we actually had people from civil servants and military that became faculty out at UTSA to help in that program. So not sure if you were involved in that one, but that was a great partnership.
Not in that one. I've had a little bit of work with with Dr. White on the cyber challenge.
Absolutely. And Dr. White was an Air Force officer at one time, yes. So Kevin, I'll hand the floor to you.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Bill. I'm Kevin Livelli. I'm a director of threat intelligence at Cylance, which is in the artificial intelligence machine learning side of things, that sort of left side of the marker that was talked about in the previous panel. I'm relatively new there, but I'm working with a team of our most capable security researchers to try to sort of rethink the way in which threat intelligence is developed and what its purpose is. My background is in investigations, initially in a law enforcement context, but then most recently actually as an investigative journalist. I worked at 60 Minutes for 10 years, and I was often one of the folks that would be calling an organization after you called or after the organization rather called the sort of incident response team to try to make sense of what happened and take away some lessons for policymakers and for the rest of us. You know, I'm excited about the new direction that we're going to be taking the threat intelligence game at Cylance.
Great. I'm Mike Ainsworth. I'm the director for the Public Sector Engineering Group at Sky High Networks. Sky High Networks is currently the only FedRAMP authorized cloud access security broker, or CASB. The mission of a CASB is really to secure interactions with cloud-delivered services, as well as to protect data that is stored in cloud-delivered services from both internal and external threats. I actually started my career about 20 years ago as an endpoint security person and kind of a researcher and tinkerer on the side. I was that annoying person that would, make things pop up on your screen and spell little messages if I had access to your machine, and kind of figured out how to kind of test the boundaries of where different applications could be exploited in different ways. And I moved from that into having security focus for industrial control systems, and then worked for a cloud automation firm, and now I'm focusing on securing cloud systems with Sky High. Happy to be here today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Syed Masood. I'm with Trend Micro. It's a security company, and we provide multi-dimensional security platform, right? So a lot of people perhaps know Trend Micro as a antivirus company. We're not that. We're a multi-dimensional. So Bill mentioned a lot about cloud. So if it's cloud security, hybrid cloud security, network defense, or the endpoint side of things. So Trend Micro really is a thought leader when it comes to security. We are one of the top threat research companies in the world. The report came out about a week and a half ago from Frost & Sullivan, if you check that out. So my background, been around for a while and done a little bit of everything, right? Network security and telecommunications, places like Sprint and cable and wireless, and working in universities, public sector, enterprise, banks, healthcare. So looking at the threat from an end-to-end perspective. So that's what I've been focused on over the last, say, 10 to 15 years. But prior to that, I was just a router jockey, right? So give me a router, give me a switch, I can build it, connect, X25, ISDN, whatever. So now I'm telling you my age, so which is not a good thing. But yeah, happy to be here. Looking forward to a fantastic interactive discussion.
Saeed, I think I've got you beat on age, but that's okay. I'm Jack Oden. I'm with Parsons Corporation. Parsons writ large is a construction company, international construction company with a huge presence in the Middle East right now. But we've done a lot of government services over the last 10, 15 years, and so they made a couple of acquisitions, one of which was the company I was with was Sparta. And they also acquired Secure Mission Solutions, and they formed an entity called Parsons Government Solutions. And we do all kinds of work for the government, as you might imagine. And the work that I do is for my customers is in industrial control systems cybersecurity, and I'm a subject matter expert in that. Also happen to be a project manager, but that's kind of secondary right now. And for my customers, what I do is I work with a team of both IT and OT, we'll talk about that in a little bit, folks on one team, and we do assessments, not just cybersecurity assessments, but also functional assessments. And from an IT guy, that's me, I've come to appreciate the criticality of understanding the OT nature of things. My background, I was an Army officer for 20 years, did a little bit of administration, then ran computer centers for them, did a little programming, and then I went into project management. And over the years, I gradually eased my way from pure IT work and project management of that to security. And then over the last 5 years, I've been doing industrial control systems cybersecurity. My primary expertise, the thing I bring to the table, is knowing about the risk management framework, how to bring a system to ATO. And so when I'm looking at the assessment, I'm looking at how the system applies whatever controls that are necessary. My customers primarily right now are DoD, so we're looking at NIST.
Great. And I failed to mention the topic of the panel up front, but we are going to talk IT and OT convergence. And that leads us really to our first question. Really is, what does OT and IT mean to you with respect to convergence in aspect of cybersecurity? And how would you define a common vocabulary and how we get at the problem of IT-OT convergence and its impact on security? I'll let you go
starting?
first.
Okay. To my understanding, I think you have to pay attention to the I part of that IT and the O part of that OT. And so information technology, I think, traditionally focuses on the management and protection of data. And operational technology refers to technology that is in support of some piece of usually physical infrastructure, right? Like an industrial control system, a SCADA system, something like that, that relies on that technology in order to help monitor it and ensure its reliability. One of the distinctions I think that's important to make here is between OT and IoT, which is another term that gets thrown around a lot of late. And while there are certain things in common between OT and IoT, I sort of think of IoT as a collection of things, right? Your water meter, a toy, some other object like that that functions without an internet connection, usually perfectly well, but with the progress of time has now been connected to the internet to add features to it. So I think those are important distinctions.
Hang on one second real quick. Hey Siri, turn off my sprinklers. So as Kevin mentioned, IoT is something that is kind of more consumer focused. And while it's definitely different than OT, it's something that I think is helpful because it's relatable to the common person who's not necessarily a technologist or somebody who has a working understanding of technology or operations concepts in general, because more and more people are introducing IT, OT convergent-like concepts into their daily lives. You know, something as simple as the programmable logic controller that runs my sprinkler system could be run through a smart home protocol that's connected to a, an Alexa or a Google smart home or something like that. And similar concepts are, starting to appear, or actually have been in industrial systems for some time, not with the same sort of loosey-goosey protocols that you would see in a smart home, but I think it helps people to understand and relate to the concepts.
So very supporting the comments made just now. So if you think about OT versus IT, so you need to look at it from a layered perspective, right? So physical layer compared to, say, application layer. So you have these OT technologies, you have all these HVAC systems, you have devices that are monitoring temperatures, there are devices that are monitoring light, things like that that are part of your manufacturing, your healthcare, your automobile industry. And now everything is kind of like getting connected to the IT infrastructure. Well, what we need to keep in mind is there are people who have their domain, they're looking at the OT side of things versus the IT side of things. So there's still two independent domains, but it's absolutely merging. So information technology, look at the software, look at the servers and things like that. But then, you have these OT domain devices that are slowly making their way up into the IT side of things so that there's better efficiency in managing and protecting these devices and domains.
The great thing of being at the end of a question like this is that I get to agree with everybody that's already spoken. But let me put a little bit different twist on the IT-OT convergence and discussion. What I've seen in talking to my customers is that OT actually reaches up into the IT organization. So we have a software, we have a human-machine interface, we have an engineer workstation, we have an operator workstation, we have the historian that are all running on traditional IT devices. Are those OT or not? Some of my customers look at the OT stopping at the programmable logic controller. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of that work that's being done at the PLC wouldn't be possible without the interaction with a SCADA, EMCS, or some other system running in the IT environment. So when I'm talking to my customers and my counterparts on the OT side, I want to find out, how do you operate if you don't have that connection? Does your system continue to operate? Does it stop? So what I want to get back to is, when we're talking about the IT-OT convergence, I can talk about all kinds of aspects of this, but since we're talking about the physical connection right now, when you're bringing an IoT device into your environment, how is that connecting? What is that talking to? Where is that reporting? Those are the important things when we're talking about convergence.
Very good. I just wonder if we have matured to a point where it's all just IT anymore. At its day, OT had a separate nomenclature and a discussion, but it's so interwoven today. You can almost argue it's all IT with different form factors that we're talking about.
It is, but maybe this is a good opportunity to sort of expand on one of the points that came up in our pre-panel discussion about despite that interconnectivity, there still seems to be somewhat of a cultural divide, right, between folks that are in the OT space with a mechanical engineering background and those in the IT space, right? That I think in itself presents part of the challenge in bringing those two pieces together effectively, is getting those two sets of folks with different backgrounds and different ways of thinking about it, and frankly, different priorities, right? To learn from each other and work together to design a system of networks that is secure, right?
That's correct.
So taking that thread, I'm going to take that a little bit farther, right? So do you believe the OT community looks at cybersecurity, are they as, mature is not the right word, but are they as advanced in thinking of the actual threat to OT as the IT market is? Do you see those two camps aligned with respect to what the threats are and how we go about mitigating them? at this point.
You want me to pick up on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so let me back up just a step to answer that question. What we have in IT and OT are two groups of people who are very, very similar. They have, in many cases, advanced degrees in some form of engineering, computer science on the IT side, electrical, mechanical engineering on the OT side. Very similar backgrounds, highly educated, very technical in their own sphere. But then on the other hand, they also have a somewhat of, if they're working together in some way, they have an appreciation for the other side to a degree. But that's where the cultural differences come into play. Because the IT folks are dealing with very short turnaround. 18 months at the most, sometimes quicker than that. I'm dealing with the next patch I've got to apply, and I've got to apply it, as we heard in the last session, I've got to apply that fast. 2 days or several hours. In the case of the OT side, very different. In their case, the culture is slow. I'm running mechanical systems that are 30 years old. And I know in the Air Force, there are some systems that are much older than that, but let's not talk about the airframes right now. Also, generator systems could be 15, 20 years old. We're not replacing those if they're not broken. The control systems that are attached to those may be as old as they are because they are embedded systems. They don't tend to break because they're they don't have the kind of I'm sorry, let me just jump ahead. So on the IT side, the technology is advancing a lot faster, so therefore those systems are being replaced. So to get back to the point, the culture is different, so what the IT folks and the OT folks need to do is to think about how the other side looks at it, especially where we approach the connection point. That's where we need to address it.
Anyone else on that one? All right. Well, again, advancing that discussion. So again, one of the pieces in the threat actor space, do you see the threat actors operating the same regardless of platform? Do you see differences? Where do you really see the core vectors and core focus areas with respect to threat vectors in the OT space and IT space?
Sure. Being focused on the cloud angle, that's where we see a lot of it. But I think if I were to take a step back, we have to kind of look at what happens as we create more sophisticated systems through abstraction. I might have something that's as simple as a set of very binary controls, like a typical logic controller. But then there may be some sort of abstraction where it's able to send data and have those controls toggled by some sort of system, and that system might have APIs that reach up into a reporting framework that might be cloud hosted. And if I'm an attacker, what I want to do is I want to look for the areas where I can find vulnerabilities that are giving me the broadest attack surface, as well as access to the highest value targets. So those are some of the things that I think people need to think about as they deliver services through a framework that is cloud-based. Is what is the value of the information or the systems that are behind that platform, and what are the exploits that may be created by delivering the platform in that fashion?
So absolutely. So the threat actors, I think, Bill, they're going to go out or go after anything that they think is of some value, of great value. Doesn't matter if it's an OT system, doesn't matter if it's an IT system, or kind of like in hybrid. Doesn't matter if it's in the data center or the cloud. The idea is for the threat actor to go after it and get a hold of critical data that they can use to use in future and cause damage. And it could be just an outage of a power grid. Could be an outage or denial of service at an auto plant. Or recently there was a maintenance window somewhere in Taipei at a bike shop or bike factory, caused significant outage for that plant to continue to build bikes, and it cost this Taipei company about $650,000 US, right? So that's significant for that type of manufacturer. So the threat actors are now looking for, as these systems, the IT, OT systems are converging, they're looking at ways to just get on the system somehow and then hop around, right? So if you have a device that's got an IP address or supports some type of protocol that's IP or internet connected, then there's very little you can do to keep them from getting on it. I mean, obviously, you have to have protection in place, multiple layers of security and all that. But I think the threat actors are not only going for monetary types of gains, but they're also looking for political, and maybe they're just hacktivists. But their purpose of going after these systems is evil, and we have to protect them.
Proverbial weakest link in the chain, right? I mean, they're going to go at the supply chain, they're going to go at the financial, they're going to go at the personnel. And certainly from the Air Force side, that's where we see. Again, a Mach 3 aircraft is pretty hard to intercept with a comlink. It's possible, but it's pretty hard to do. But when it's sitting on the flight line, it's the most vulnerable. So along that line, this elevation or hopping between IT and OT and the perspective of having platforms and people are finding the weakest link in there, where do you see us with respect to technology maturation, with respect to OT in general? The security framework, information sharing framework, I mean, relatively more immature in development than, again, it's older age systems typically. Where do you see that from a tech maturation, and potentially where do you see some opportunities to improve there?
In my mind, it's incredibly nascent. The controls that are available for systems at the operations level are often either non-existent or they're very basic, and they're assuming that you're providing other controls in front of them. There's some sort of, there's usually an assumption that you have created defense in-depth controls to protect against somebody attacking that device directly. People sometimes forget that, and you may have heard about the casino that was recently breached through the fish tank. The casino has tremendous investments in security over their traditional systems, but then they forget that the fish tank, would also need to be behind the firewall, and that if the fish tank is compromised as a place where somebody can use it as a jumping point to get in the network, then somebody could kind of get around traditional perimeter defenses. So I think that's one of the things that you'd want to really have a lot of thought and consideration in, is what the defenses are for the operation technologies, since most of them don't have the ability to have very depth or complex systems protecting themselves. So
just to add a couple of comments to that, I don't know if you all remember the DNS outage dying. These home-based systems, right? You're sitting on top of the TV, and now it's making a DNS connection, request to and dying, and then was the service provider. So now that's causing, now you have hundreds of thousands of millions of these devices requesting something from that service. That basically ultimately caused a denial of service attack. Now, this could happen, on any device. You have all of these internet-connected devices, the IoTs. If they start behaving in a manner where it's unusual or abnormal, and if that traffic flow is not taken into consideration, and if you cannot use that information and convert that into something intelligent, and so you can respond to it very quickly, you will see a lot more outages. So in this case, perhaps the idea could be that, hey, use a technology. So the end result was the users couldn't get to like the places like PayPal and other, really highly used internet services because those customers were pointing to Dyn for DNS resolution, right? But it was a denial of service type attack. But had they been using a technology where they were pointing their DNS service to a recursive DNS type of solution where it keeps a smart entry or smart cache of DNS entries of the last known address to that site, then these customers would have seen no outages. But you have to think about these attacks in multi-dimension ways, right? You have to see, it's like a game of chess. I need to see 3 or 4 different moves in future to figure out what the bad guys are going to do. And they're not going to stop, and we will not either, right? But so it's an ongoing game. So you're talking about all these devices getting attacked and causing denial of services or other impacts. But we need to, as practitioners, we need to absolutely understand, what's next. Look at, forward threat research teams have to be in place. At Trend Micro, we have teams who look at, events or threats that are coming down the road, and we have researchers, and that's what they do. They have, that's their job all day long, every day. So being able to determine what could be happening on these devices, the fish tanks or the TV box or anything that has a way to get out to the internet, we need to understand what protocols, what ports they're operating on what kind of attacks they could be prone to go under, and how we can determine and block those attacks.
If I might, I keep going to the kind of a pure industrial environment, and I apologize for anybody that doesn't share that passion with me, but let me take us back there. There are a lot of great tools out there, and every day we're coming up with more tools, and I admire the producers of those products, and we look at them constantly. The concern that my customers have is putting a product in place to block something may in fact break the very service that is critical to the mission, and that's the thing that we're concerned with. So as practitioners, as consultants, in my case, as vendors, producers, what we have to be sure of is the product that we're producing, the implementation that we're suggesting, is not going to break the very thing that's important to the mission.
Very good. We've got a couple more questions, but if anyone has a question, they can raise their hand. We'll wait, or I can keep pressing through. But there is a microphone in the back if anybody. If anyone would like to, I'll keep going. And really on that vein, you kind of stole the right next question out of this is, as practitioners, right, we're going into the CIO of the company. I'm going to put this in very basic terms, just you in your personal life. We joked a little bit about Siri and your water sprinkler, but at the end of the day, you're making those same risk decisions at home. Whether it's your alarm system, whether it's your air conditioning, or, I mean, there's many things that go wrong. So I'd be curious, are you using those technologies at home? You don't have to say which ones, so we can figure that one out. But how do you balance those work life and capabilities that come out of it with the security threat that we all know is there? Because I think it's a good use case as you present it to your CIO of how I'm balancing my own personal risk with the benefits that come out of those, in this case, OT devices. So if you want to go first with your sprinklers, and I hear I got a note that said they were going right now, so.
Oh, right, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, so I think the research and tinkerer side of me can't help but delve into automation, and you always have to look at the risks. Is anybody a fan of Big Bang Theory? Have you seen the TV show? So there's an episode that's very old, it was probably like second season, where they're experimenting with a home automation protocol. I think it was called KNX, and they had a lamp, and they hooked the lamp up to the internet, And then they're like, okay, what's going to happen? And then the lamp starts blinking because someone from online is turning the light on and off. But then mayhem ensues when they didn't realize they'd also hooked the automation protocol up to the rest of the lights, and the whole house starts bling, 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 and everybody's freaking out, and get it offline, get it offline. And, you know, and so those are the things that happen. And in general, what I think we do is we see a technology, we say that's really cool, let's try it out, and then we sometimes have this habit of looking at the risks too late. So maybe if they would have quantified the risks of having unauthenticated users having access to the lights before they made that available, and I know that's a silly example, but hopefully it's relatable, where comprehensive risk-based analysis is you know, a necessary step for adopting any new technology, but it shouldn't prevent us from adopting technology. We need to boldly go out there, be innovative, be inventive, and tackle the problems as we see them and try to identify them before they come.
How many home users know about segmenting their network?
That's true.
It's a good point. I don't happen to use any of this. I don't have any smart sprinklers in my house, but I was sort of, I perked up when I heard Rob Joyce, who's the White House coordinator for cyber and a former leader at NSA and the TAO, tell a DC audience at a conference recently about the Raspberry Pi that he had hooked up to his washing machine, washer dryer, so that it would text him when the cycle was done. And he said that introduced an interesting thought, which is that he would have to patch that every so often. That was yet another thing that he had to think about upgrading, maintaining, worrying about. And ultimately, I think what we're talking about in terms of network segmentation and being aware of what's connected to the internet within your environment goes back to just understanding your environment, right? And understanding your environment better than your adversary. Because I think that seems to be the common denominator among all of the attack vectors and motivations behind threat actors that we look at, certainly at Cylance, is we see folks trying to understand the network before they take or destroy or whatever it is they're ultimately there to do, is understand the network better than you do, right? And so that poses a challenge in terms of having enough employees to chase the ball, as it were. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think Cylance has chosen to go another route and let the machines do what machines do best, right? And help you monitor your environment in a more, at machine speed, right? In a more, and at scale, in a more comprehensive way.
So you're working on AI for OT right now, for the home systems?
Well, no comment, but stay tuned, yeah.
So a friend of mine recently invested some money in a company on Kickstarter. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So I said, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, I'm going to put some money in this company. I'm like, why? He's like, I want to get one of the first 10 smoker grills from this company. I'm like, why? Well, I just want to be able to cook things and I don't have to be at home. I'm like, how are you going to do that? I'm just going to dump in lots of fuel in it, and then I'm going to go shopping or ride my bike, but control it from the app on my iPhone or whatever. I'm like, are you kidding me? So what's the fun of grilling then? You know. So, but he did, and that company actually sent him one of the first 10 grills that they made. He loves it, but he's also now vulnerable, right? My wife likes to start her Volvo on her app. She's also vulnerable. I mean, there's so many things that are now connected, and I do worry about my kids. They're 13, 10, and 3. They have Alexa, but they use it for education, so they can't figure out a math problem. They'll ask Alexa, and they confirm the answer and things like that. So that's good. But oftentimes, my wife will go and press the button so that it's now, at least we think that it's now not listening to us when we're talking. Although we are multilingual, so we're tricking Alexa a little bit. So anyway, there are concerns, Bill. Absolutely, we as advisors, CISSPs, practitioners, all researchers, we have to continue to educate the user community on be vigilant, think about things they're not thinking about. It's like if you see or observe something unusual, report it, right? So that's going to be the message that I always carry with, tell my kids too. Something bad you run across when you run the computer, something bad comes up, you need to know that it's bad and come tell us so that we can, add one more filter. Right now they can't get out and do much on internet, but they have some limited access. But again, user awareness is key in this matter.
And I just want to add something to this discussion. We talked earlier about safety. To those of us in the IT world, safety means something. Cyber safety, safety of our kids on the internet. But in the OT world, safety means something completely different. And even if we're talking about our own home systems, you don't know what that connection to the internet might do in the case of your car. We've heard of cars being hacked. We've also heard of runaway centrifuges that are either connected or disconnected as the situation has been reported. So we have to keep both kinds of safety involved when we're talking about this kind of work.
Yeah, I would just add one other thought that occurred to me just listening to you guys talk about the divide between IT and OT cultures is that it strikes me that in the OT side of things, there is much more thought has been given to what happens if something breaks, right? There's generally a plan in terms of how to get things back up and running. On the IT side, there are no shortage of examples of after a breach of companies and organizations not really understanding what to do, how to respond, how to get things back up, right? And so I think there should be a sense of urgency here, right? The ideas that we're discussing, as Jack has just pointed out, are no longer theoretical, right? That hop between IT and OT has happened. Sure. It's happened in Iran. It's happened in Saudi Arabia. It's happened it's happened in Ukraine, right? And if you're reading along closely and conducting research as we are, you'll see that there are folks knocking at the door at critical infrastructure organizations in this country, right? Trying to learn that network, conceivably with the idea of making that hop, right? At some point. So I think there should be some urgency there, and not just among the critical infrastructure sector. Think about the Target breach, right? Unless my memory is failing me, that organization was breached through the HVAC system, right? That's right. So Target had given the HVAC vendor network access so that they could remotely monitor the air conditioning at various Target locations, and that was the initial vector of attack, right? That was the foothold for the attackers to then exploit that network. They weren't trying to destroy the air conditioning system or disrupt it. They were after money, right? But it just serves to remind us that I think there ought to be more of a sense of urgency about solving this problem and addressing it, right? Because the breaches are not going to stop.
Very good. We only have probably about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to do a speed round one at the very end. If you had 30 seconds to convince or to tell your CIO something about OT, what would that be? We talked a little bit about urgency, but what would be the key thematic that you think your CIO should worry about with respect to OT security?
I would say 2 words: network segmentation, right? Make sure that your OT network is not facing the internet.
Behavioral analytics, not just between user-to-machine interactions, but also machine-to-machine interactions, or maybe even think of it as entity interactions, where application-to-application, application-to-machine interactions. Look for anomalies, behavioral threats.
So definitely encourage the leaders of any organization to sit down and have a regular cadence, understand the differences between IT and OT, the vulnerabilities associated with those systems, and come together, educate each other what's critical and how they can work together to make sure that network segmentation is there, behavioral analysis is absolutely taken a look at, so that you can come up with a plan on what to do, if you are compromised, how best you can or quickly you can come back to production and service. So definitely having that awareness.
And I'm going to be completely different on this one. The two most important things for any system owner to know is what's on their network, so they need to understand every component of their network, and then they need to do a vulnerability analysis. Two most important things. Everything else flows from that.
Very good. Would you join me in thanking the panel today?